There's almost too many video game RPGs out there to count, but very few of them are true pioneers in redefining the genre. Ultima IV, Quest of the Avatar, is one of those games. It would take the style and spirit of what came before it and not only refine them, but revolutionize the role-playing experience. The game was originally released in 1985 by Origin Systems for every popular computer system at the time, and even a few not-so-popular ones. In 1990, the game was ported to home consoles, with the Sega Master System receiving a very faithful port programmed by the dev team at Origin Systems, and the NES, where it was reworked into more of a JRPG experience. Since then, fans of the game have created various mods. The most popular is a fan patch for the PC version that bumps the colors from 16 to 256 and adds MIDI music. There's even a mod of the 2002 game Neverwinter Nights called Ultima IV Reborn, an entire reimagining of Quest of the Avatar made by the dedicated fan community. Ultima IV takes place a few years after the third entry and is the first game in what is known as the Age of Enlightenment trilogy. The game engine is similar to the previous 3 Ultima games, with many improvements. While these enhancements are nice, it's the game itself that redefines RPGs. As the title suggests, this is the Quest of the Avatar, and you are that avatar. Interestingly, this game is the first time the term avatar is used in context of a stand-in for the player. Before this, it was only defined as a religious concept. The main character of the game is you, or more specifically, a computer character stand-in for you. Unlike most other RPGs, the goal isn't to save a princess or stop an ancient evil that's awakened from destroying the world. Instead, you're tasked with becoming the Avatar of Virtue. An Avatar of Virtue is one that embodies the principles of the 8 virtues and is an example of a truly virtuous person for humanity to emulate. The virtues presented in the game are honesty, compassion, valor, justice, sacrifice, honor, spirituality, and humility. Each one of these virtues must be practiced throughout the game, and the engine keeps a hidden record of your level in each virtue to determine when you've met the conditions to become an avatar in that virtue. When it comes to taking actions in the game, that act may raise or lower that particular virtue's score. For instance, valor can be increased by killing an evil enemy, but if you flee from an enemy, it lowers your level of valor. Every decision you make can potentially increase or decrease your virtues, and it's essential that you make decisions wisely with the ultimate goal of trying to be a good person. This means you're not going to be able to just kill anything that crosses your path, rob castles and houses blind, or cheat shopkeepers when making purchases. This was definitely a different experience for me, as I had to always be thinking of the consequences of my actions throughout the game. Sometimes these virtues will even come into conflict, and you ultimately have to make a moral decision. An example of this is when encountering a non-evil creature in your journey. Attacking a non-evil creature will negatively affect your justice virtue, but running away will lower your valor virtue and increase your compassion virtue. I thought this was a really clever way to illustrate the real-world difficulty of having to make a moral decision, where there may be negative consequences as the results of your actions. Some of the other virtues made me feel like I was a real participant in the game world as I was interacting with NPCs in a meaningful way. This included giving money to the poor as an act of compassion and donating blood to the sick and infirm. Now you might be thinking, this sounds really boring and may even be a waste of your time, but there is still plenty of adventure and battle waiting for you. These actions to obtain virtue are kind of like the building blocks to place you in the frame of mind of not just becoming an ultimate warrior, but truly improving yourself in a good way. So what do you have to do to become an avatar, the shining example for humanity to aspire towards? First, you must become an avatar in the 8 virtues. To do this, you'll need to practice those virtues, locate the rune for each virtue, locate and recruit all the companions of the avatar, then meditate at each shrine representing that particular virtue. Second, you'll need to assemble the key of 3 parts. To do this, you'll need to find the 8 virtue stones located in dungeons created by the evil forces and conveniently named after the corresponding vices for each virtue. You'll then need to use the clues gathered throughout the world to use the stones at 3 altars to create the key fragments. Third, you'll need to find the Bell of Courage, Candle of Love, and Book of Truth. These items will allow you to access the Stygian Abyss alongside the key. You optionally can find the Skull of Mondain, the evil boss of the first Ultima game, to destroy in the volcano on the island of the Avatar, thus conquering pure evil. Finally, you must enter the Stygian Abyss, located in a volcano on the island of the Avatar, the last bastion of the world's evil forces, and enter the Chamber of the Codex and answer the questions posed by the Codex of Ultimate Wisdom. You're treated to an introduction that explains how events have progressed since defeating Exodus in Ultima III. You're then brought from Earth to the land of Britannia by Moongate, the magical teleportation system in the game which is powered by the alignment of the two moons. At this point, you're told to make sure that you've read the History of Britannia. Okay, this is a common thing with older computer RPGs. They expect you to have read the instructions and understand the concepts of the world in which you'll be adventuring. Outside of the reference card that tells you what commands are mapped to which keys, there are 3 very important items included with the game. The first is the History of Britannia as told by Kyle the Younger. This acts as the manual for the game, but it does so in a way that I've never really seen before, and I really like how this was done. Instead of a boring set of instructions, the history is written as if this were a tourist guide to the world itself. At no point does it break the fourth wall of the game world. Reading this is key to understanding the world around you. Included is the political history and geography of Britannia. A section describing the various careers in Britannia describes the character classes you'll encounter. Another section provides info about shops and shrines, as if you're reading a guide to the best restaurants in the area. This provides a list of non-magical items, armor, and weapons you'll find across the world as well. There's also a bestiary that gives a description and pictures of the creatures that roam the land. This is essential to knowing what is evil and potentially how enemies will attack, allowing you to devise an appropriate strategy. Finally, there's a section on skills of combat which give you a good idea how to approach fights against various enemies. The second item included with the game, which you should also read, is the Book of Mystic Wisdom. This is written to appear like a tome found among the possessions of a traveling wizard. Every spell known within the game is described in meticulous detail, including some anecdotes of when it was used and cases where casting went wrong, and includes a list of reagents needed to create the spell. Unfortunately for the reader, the author was not able to discover the reagents of several powerful magic spells, meaning that you'll have to discover those on your own within the game world. There's also a spell where the author may have been mistaken about the particular ingredients. You'll find clues to this by talking to many of the mages throughout the game. Finally, you'll need your trusty map of the world. The original computer release contained a woven cloth map. Later reissues, as well as the Master System and NES versions, sadly only have a fold-out paper map. Once you've confirmed to the game that you've read the History of Britannia, or just lied and said that you did anyway, it's time to enter the character creation phase. I found this to be an interesting way to determine your character, but unfortunately it's not clear what classes you'll get based on this method. You're asked several questions by a fortune teller. Each one presents a scenario, and you have to pick which moral virtue you would apply in the situation. The answers to all of these questions will determine which moral you chose the most, and determines your character class and starting town for your adventure. I'll give the game points for it being unique, but I would rather have this been used for something else, like your initial stats, and allowed me to pick my own class. I ended up becoming a fighter due to valor being my strongest virtue, which I was fine with. I'm just glad I didn't end up as a shepherd. The character you get replaces one of the 8 companions, and you start in their hometown. In my case, I started in Jalome on an isolated island. From there, it was up to me to find out what to do. You're directed early on to speak with the king, Lord British, so your first task is to figure out how to get to Britain. It's obviously easy if you're on the main continent, but if you're on an island city like Jalome, Moonglow, or Skara Brae, you'll need to learn to use the Moongates to teleport. Lord British and his trusty Seer Hawkwind will give you the information you'll need to understand what to do, then you're off. How you want to proceed is up to you, and I really like when games do this. You can focus on a single virtue, or go exploring in the dungeons for the virtue stones, or just travel the world and learn about the people along the way. Each town is unique in some way, and makes me feel like a lot of care was put into planning this world. The castle town of Britain is full of travelers, many buildings, shops, inns, and taverns. Skara Brae, on the other hand, is a small farming community with many shepherds and livestock. Buccaneer's Den looks like a port town and is filled with thieves, scoundrels, and seedy elements. Everything looks and feels different in each town, and nothing felt generic. There's even the cursed, ruined city of Magincia, where the residents forsook humility and became obsessed with pride, ultimately cursed to live out an empty existence as undead fiends. The residents of castles and towns are really where the game impressed me. Every person can be talked to, though some may not be as willing to say as much to you as others. They don't just have a single line of dialogue like many games, but you actually strike up a conversation with them. Typing certain keywords will trigger responses, and they may even ask questions of you, to which a favorable answer might reveal a clue to solving your quest. The NES and Master System versions present a list of keywords that you can use, but in the PC versions, it's up to you to decide what to ask. It's always a good idea to ask their name and job. From there, you need to pick up on clues of what to ask next. For instance, if someone says that they're a sailor, you might ask them about sailing or about their ship. Other times, a villager might direct you to a certain person about a specific subject. Just make sure that you take some notes about what people tell you. You'll never know what info is just passing conversation and what is important. This would happen a lot to me, where I'd meet someone and not know to ask them about a certain item or location. Then when I'm talking to someone else in a different town, they direct me back to that other person. I'm glad I was writing this down, as it saved me countless hours of just looking in every town for a particular person that I vaguely remember talking to days earlier. There are 7 different companions, all of a different character class, who must be recruited. Their skills balance out the team, with the exception of Katrina, the shepherd, who doesn't provide much help in combat and can't use magic. I'm not quite sure why this character class exists in the game. I like that many of these characters are familiar to you if you've played the previous games. Shamino the Ranger and the Bard, formerly Jester Iolo, have been recurring characters since the original Ultima, and Dupree, the Paladin, has been part of the series since Ultima II. While the world is quite different from the previous entries, these characters add a nice sense of familiarity to the game, almost like you're returning home after spending years away. The overworld and towns are played from an overhead perspective. The graphics are serviceable, and you can tell what objects are, but that's about it. It's probably the only weak aspect to the game, but it is on par with games from that year. There are plenty of unique sprites, and they do have some animation. Enemies will appear on the overworld map and chase you forever. The only way to get away from them is to fight them or enter a moon gate. Even if you enter a town, they'll be waiting for you when you leave. They really do want to see you dead. When you enter dungeons, the game changes to a first-person perspective. Dungeons have 8 floors, and each floor is quite large. Luckily, you can use gems to view the map of an area, but it only shows a small area around your character. Floors can be quite maze-like, but there are rewards for exploring every nook and cranny in the form of treasure and orbs that permanently increase your stats. Enemies will move around in front of you, but when you step onto a square with an enemy or enter a predetermined room, the battle will commence. The combat didn't change from Ultima 3, and given how easy it is to get a hang of and gives you many tactical options, I'm glad they didn't change what already worked. You battle enemies on a grid-based field. The design of the terrain is determined by the square the encounter occurs on. There are hundreds of configurations of the battlefield throughout the game, with dungeon rooms being the most unique by far. You'll have to deal with traps, obstructions, magical barriers, and even fake walls in some dungeons. You get one action with all of your characters, then the enemy gets one action with every one of theirs. You can move, attack, cast magic, equip a weapon, use an item, or skip your turn. The one thing I really dislike is that there's no way to undo a move, so if you hit the wrong key by mistake, that's it for that character's turn. This happened to me a lot, especially when I was moving my characters through some of the maze-like areas where there's not a lot of room to move. Positioning yourself in combat in a way that you can take out enemies the fastest is key to mastering this game. You only gain experience for killing an enemy, and a critically wounded enemy will always attempt to flee if they can. So you need to position yourself so that you have a way to eliminate them. Bows and magic spells work really great in this regard, and so does surrounding a single enemy and just beating on them. I should point out that the PC versions only allow you to attack horizontally and vertically, not in any diagonals, but the enemies can fire ranged weapons diagonally. This was changed in the Master System version, and you can fire in all 8 directions, and that's a much easier game because of it. You'll have to grind in order to gain enough experience to recruit all your companions, but it's not really that bad. You'll get into a lot of fights when traveling on foot, and you can start the dungeons early enough that the game doesn't get boring. Most of the time I spent in the game was exploring the world and piecing together clues to find things like the hidden runes, virtue stones, as well as the spell reagents and locations of quest items. I found this to be really enjoyable and made me have to think really hard through many of these clues. The best part of this game is taking on the role of becoming the avatar of virtue. I traveled from town to town and found myself thinking about how I could be more compassionate and whether I was being humble as I spoke with residents throughout the game. You see people that are aspiring to be better than just the sum of their parts, and in a sad turn, you witness the fallout of those that fell from paradise. All the while, the forces of evil in the world are amassing an army to sow the seeds of chaos, deceit, and every other evil vice, all of whom will go to the ends of the earth to stop your ascendancy to avatarhood. Ultima IV is currently available for free on GOG.com, and you can pick up the entire Age of Enlightenment trilogy for around $6 when it's not on sale. If you're looking for something different in an RPG, check out this one, but beware, you can easily sink 50 to 100 hours into this game. I enjoyed it so much that I'd like to play it again a few years down the road with a different character class and discover all the things that I know that I missed in my first playthrough. I'm also interested in playing through the redesigned port on the NES to see the Japanese take on the game. Let me know what your thoughts are on this game. Have you played any of the mini games in the Ultima series? Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Until then.